Guys, we are welcome to the Tailors Up. Happy new month. Trust you guys are all doing great. Alright, so in this video I'll be showing you how I make my own off-shoulder bustier blouse. I've tried other methods, but this method works perfectly for me. It's easy, it's super fast. I trust that if you try it and it works for you, you can also do it this way. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, the first thing I do is to take out 6.5 inches, which serves as the yoke. Let's assume you are cutting this blouse all the way. I'm going to add yoke. The measurement for that yoke at the upper part is 6.5 inches. And I go ahead and measure all my vertical measurements first. Your vertical measurements are your shoulder to nipple points, length of blouse, shoulder to waistline, under bust, etc. Then I go ahead and measure my horizontal measurements. Like the foundational blouse, the basic blouse, do it that way. The only difference is that I'm going to add enough allowance to it. So after that, I go ahead and measure my nipple to nipple. The nipple to nipple for this blouse is 7 inches. That's if I divide it into 4, I have 3. If I divide it into 2, sorry, I have 3.5 inches. I go ahead and measure 4. Then on the under bust, I reduce that nipple to nipple point measurements that I've already measured for. I reduce it by 1 inch. So I go ahead and measure 3 inches. In this particular place, I measured 4 1/4 instead of 4 inches. I added a little more, so that instead of 7 inches, my nipple to nipple will be 7.5. So, and the under bust reduced by 1 inch. Some people, they draw a straight line from top to bottom and start reduction on both sides. It's still the same thing. All right, I also reduce my waist by 1 inch, and the hip area, I add the exact measurements on the nipple to nipple. So the distance between the center fronts and the side fronts is about 2 inches to 2.5 inches. Okay, so then on the shoulder area, the distance also is about 2 inches. I measure my back. So whatever I cut out from the distance between both, from the upper part, the upper bust, I add it back and I measure the back. I measure the back and I add it back. And I also add that, for instance, if the back measurement is 14, I measure 7, I add that 2 inches or about 2.5 inches back. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is to use the front measurement. After cutting, I use the front measurement to cut the back. Yes, that's the way I do it. So at the deepest part of the back, which is around the waistline, I take out the yoke measurement as well. Okay, and measure the zip allowance for this back is 1.5 inches. So I make that deepest part, I make it about 1/2 inch, add my 1 inch, 1.5 inches down and up, and I connect it. So whatever I removed from that place, that deepest part, I add it back on the other side. On the other side where I shape it, as you can see it, I add it back. Okay, then the other side of the back, I cut it exactly the same way. The only difference is that I reduce that the bustier part. I cut out the curved part on the front. I'm going to cut it out. All right, so I place it on it to cut it. Then after I finish cutting it, sometimes I even don't do that. I cut it with it, just as is in this video. All right, so after that, we have it. Then the next thing I'll do is to go ahead and add all the necessary lining. after that. So now we are cutting the sleeves. So fold the sleeve like you are cutting a half circle flare. As you can see it, measure the bicep of the bicep. It's not it's like your bicep span. It's from one armpit to the other armpit. Okay, then measure the length of the sleeve. Measure your armhole of the sleeve. I'll measure the armhole of the sleeve and I go ahead and cut it. All right, it's as simple as ABC. This method works very, very fine for me. I've been using it for years. I've tried other method, but if this method works for you, why not? So I also go ahead and measure the a tiny straight strap that we're going to use to tape the edge of the upper part of the sleeve. The lower part is going to have rubber, so it doesn't need any taping, but the upper part we need to tape it. I don't want to use my lining to turn it in. I want it to be thicker. I'm not going to add any stay, so I use that. So now we go ahead, we cut all the necessary lining. As you can see, I cut all the lining as I've already laid it down. All right, I like to use, even if I'm using a doll face satin for my lining, I still like to line it full. I line it, I put gum stay on my lining, and I use the breast pad and also a paper stay for the main, or you can use X stay as the case, depending on you. Paper stay works well, the thick one. It works well for me even if I don't have to do any bust caging. All right, it stays very well. You will see the effect on this blouse when we get there. It stays really, really well. My paper stay with my for some of us that like our comfort so much, bust caging is beautiful, but there are other ways too. Okay, so that's about that. So now the next thing we do, of course, we cut the lining for the sleeve. We cut the lining for the sleeve. Okay. All right. All right, guys. I trust you're following. I trust you're. If you have any questions, you don't hesitate to let me know at the comment section. All right. So, but this is the method that I use. All right. So now we are done. I've added all the necessary stay. I've added everything. The next thing to do now is to join it. I'll join all the necessary places. I join it together. After joining, here is it. Join lining to lining. I've joined cloth to cloth. That's the way I do it. Then place the front. You have to arrange it together. I'm arranging it together now because I want to cut the neckline. You can cut any neckline of your choice after you have done that. So I go ahead and fold the front together. I'll fold it together into two. Okay, and I'll use pin to hold it down. I'll use pin to hold all the necessary so that it's equal. Make sure that I'm going to make sure that all the sides are equal. Okay, so to avoid the separation, maybe while we are cutting also, I use pin to hold it down. So now in this blouse, this blouse has a sweetheart neckline. All right, so I don't want it to be so deep, so I just take out like 1.5 inches for the depth of that the deep part. Okay, I also take out my yoke measurement up to get the armhole length. So I go ahead and trim it. I trim the armhole. I trim it down, so the first measurement was just so just in case there are any issues, you just do it in a way that you can come back and trim it again to your taste or to the way it should be. All right, so after I've trimmed out the neckline of the front, go ahead and do the same thing for the back. Pin, make sure that all the sides are equal like we did for the front. Make sure that all the sides are equal. This back measurement, I want it to be lower than the front. It's going to be lower than the front. So if I take out the measurement of the yoke now, first thing is I measure the what's it called, the zip allowance. Then I measure how deep by removing the yoke measurement first. I measure how deep I want the neckline to be. I want it to be a bit lower than the front, and I trim out the armhole. And that's about that. Then we'll go ahead and measure all our measurements: the bust, the waist, the hip. I go ahead and trace out all the necessary measurements. Okay, I trace out all the way I do it is I like most of my sewing to be inside, so I do lining to lining and clothes to clothes. All right, so that's about that. We're almost done with the blouse already. Alright, so after joining all the sides, here we have I've joined the neckline, the bottom parts, I've joined everywhere. Okay, so the next thing to do now is to turn it to the other side. I'm going to open it and turn it to the other side. I'm going to do a proper ironing on it. Alright, so if you are going to be using this method, make sure to get all your measurements correctly, because it's quite stressful if after you've turned in all the lining, then it will now need adjustment. Most of the time my clothes don't need adjustments. Alright, so now we are done. Here is it. Alright, then I add my zip. I like to turn in my zip as well. Okay, so here is it. I've joined it, joined the zip. So the next thing to do now is add the sleeve. I've done one part of the sleeve, as you can see, added rubber on the side. All right, so this is the way I did it. My bicep reduced by 2 inches, and I cut that rubber. For example, my bicep is 12, I cut 10 inches rubber. I join on both sides of the cloth, and I use the lining to start tracing it out. You know the way I sew it down on the lining, dragging the rubber. All right, so after then I used the stripe that I cut earlier, that I showed you, to tape in the upper part of the sleeve, and I joined the sides, and then our blouse is ready. All right, so the next thing to do now is just to add the sleeves, and we are done. All right, so let me know what you think in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.